Welcome back, everybody. I'm so excited to have you back here at the Gestalt Get-Together. If you're listening live here with SpeechTherapyPD, thank you for trusting us with your continuing education. This podcast is offered for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. If you're listening later on a streaming platform, thanks for being here. You might want to consider signing up for SpeechTherapyPD to make sure you get all your hours for 2026. You can use my code Gestalt33 to get this episode absolutely for free. I want to give my disclosures before we begin. So I'm the owner of Crescendo Communication Private Practice. I receive compensation for these episodes from SpeechTherapyPD. I sell online products and courses, and I provide continuing education trainings. My non-financial disclosure is that I'm an ASHA presenter. And my name is Corinne Zmoos. I'm a speech language pathologist, and I exclusively work with Gestalt language processors. This population is my passion. Now, you know it, and I know it, that the OT-SLP relationship can be a very powerful alliance. For neurodivergent children and their families, collaboration across disciplines can make a meaningful difference in the relationship, the regulation, access to learning, and ability to learn new skills. In this episode, I'll be interviewing pediatric occupational therapist Erin Heyn about centering caregiver regulation and cue reading to create a strong foundation for skill acquisition, especially when we're thinking about early life and those really early connection opportunities between caregivers and their kids. Erin is going to share about sensory processing, nervous system regulation, and really how those things shape everything that comes after: attention, movement, feeding, connection, and language. Especially why caregiver education and training is essential in early development. We hope that you come away with ideas for how to connect with OTs on your clients' teams on this topic to enhance language acquisition. So who is Erin? Who are you going to be meeting? Erin Heyn is a pediatric OT and lactation counselor who specializes in infant and toddler feeding and development. She started Tiny Tides Therapy, a mobile therapy practice, in January of 2025. Erin is passionate about supporting little ones and their families by meeting them where they are, literally, and finding ways to support their unique goals. So with that, welcome to the podcast, Erin.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So Erin, can you tell me a little bit about what brought you into the world of occupational therapy and then how you narrowed down to your current focus?
Yeah, so honestly, I can't even remember how I fell into the OT world. I actually started initially wanting to be a PT, and then I started shadowing, and I was like, oh, I'm definitely an OT. I'm not a PT. Nothing against PTs, love them. But once I started learning more about OT and how it's kind of a combination of the arts and sciences, I fell in love with it. And I initially started my OT career working in outpatient pediatric clinics, and I worked in a variety of different clinics and was working with older kids, I'll say, so anywhere from like 5 and up. So if that's older, I don't know. But so when I was working with them, I found that I would make progress, but it wasn't very quick, and I felt like maybe I'd be seeing this kid for, a long time every week, and we were making small gains, and I felt like if I could support kids early on and intervene earlier, it might make a bigger difference. And so I started shadowing other therapists that I work with who were working with babies and found that that was what I wanted to do. And then also diving into the feeding world, I started doing that because I love food and I love eating. And when I saw other therapists doing it, I was like, hey, I want to learn more about this. And yeah, just did a lot of different courses and learning from amazing mentors, and just became obsessed with this specific niche population and haven't looked back.
Yeah, you seem really passionate about it, which is exciting to see and probably really great for the families you work with. Some of the reasons I was looking forward to having you is because I hear from families who might be later on in their experiences and their journey. They ask me, like, well, what could I have done earlier on in my kid's life to help with the cue reading that we know is challenging later on for a lot of autistic kids. And like the signals that might be misinterpreted or missed in that human to human, the dance of communication. So I want to talk to you about that, but also because I was thinking about how feeding and the relationship to food is also can be really complicated for autistic kids. But today we're really, be sticking to the sensory side of it, that cue reading. Let's zoom back out. Tell us about the senses. There might be people listening to this podcast tonight, next week, who don't really know anything about the senses other than those basic 5. What would you tell them?
So there's actually 8 sensory systems. And so a lot of people have heard about the tactile or touch system, obviously sight, hearing, smell, taste. Those are our big ones, right? In the therapy and OT world, we are pretty obsessed with some other sensory systems like proprioception, interoception, and the vestibular system. Those are less well known, but they are so important and foundational for so many skills. Yeah.
All right, walk us through those 3. Give us the basics.
Yep. So let's start with the vestibular system. So that is really, if you think about any change in position of your head, any movement-based activity, so swinging, going down a slide, running, jumping, that's all vestibular input for our kiddos and for us. And some kids really like this kind of input, or they might look for more of this input in their environment. They might be those movers and shakers. Some kids are really overwhelmed by it. There might be kids who get really dizzy on a swing, or they might even vomit after being on a swing, or they might be overwhelmed with being in the car seat. So that's our vestibular system, thinking about movement and balance. And then the proprioceptive system, which is my personal favorite, is really related to where our body is positioned in space. So thinking about our body awareness. And this type of input is felt between our joints. So it's any type of like compression to the joints. So I always explain it as like heavy work. That's a well-known therapy term. So any, input that's using the muscles like crawling, climbing, pushing, pulling, carrying something heavy, doing like animal walks, things like that. Also thinking about deep pressure. So a lot of adults or kids too, like a weighted blanket or that heavy input or a deep hug, that's that proprioceptive input. It tends to be very calming and regulating to our nervous systems. So I always say, when in doubt, prop it out. And there's just so many great different proprioceptive activities that can really help kids feel like calm and regulated. And then the last one was interoception, which is basically our body's internal cues. So thinking about hunger cues, fullness cues, knowing when we have to go to the bathroom, knowing when we're tired. And that is a challenging sense for a lot of our kids, because it requires really good body awareness. I think a lot of adults struggle with interoception too. So that's also a really important one and plays a big role into regulation too.
That's really helpful to map all those out, because I think when I start working with a new family, that's one of the first things I'll talk about, because we'll talk about regulation and how that is, the foundation, but giving language, especially for vestibular and proprioception, of it can fill in the blanks of, why is my kid doing that? Mm-hmm. Why does my kid really like this? Or why are they drawn to certain activities? Once you can give the vocabulary for the vestibular seeking or avoiding, the proprioceptive seeking or avoiding, it helps make sense of their kid, and then they can be more informed about what to do.
Definitely.
With them. I find that the interoceptive knowledge can really help families where food is hard, going to the bathroom is hard, helping them understand that there's a name for this, and it can help explain the complexity there. And again, once we know the frame around what's happening, it helps us filter into better solutions for it. So I'm a big fan of teaching about these. When in doubt, appropriate out is hilarious. So
Love
funny.
that one.
Okay, so thinking about nervous system regulation, broadly speaking, what would you describe that as?
So, regulation is the nervous system's ability to kind of stay in an optimal state that we need to be in for learning, feeding, connecting, playing, communicating, all of those things. So, that's kind of what regulation is as a whole.
Tell me how that presents in the kids that you work with. What does regulation look like in your population, not only for the kids, but for the caregivers?
Yeah. So for our kiddos, regulation can mean that a child might be looking overwhelmed in their environment. There's a lot of different, I'll just share some examples of what I think kind of like are signs of dysregulation, or meaning that our nervous system might not be functioning in that optimal state. So if a child is excessively moving, or a lot of people call that a sensory seeker, but excessive movement might be a sign that we are struggling to stay like regulated and calm. Also having a kiddo who maybe is covering their ears, or they're turning away from something, those are all signs that something in the environment is overwhelming and upsetting to them. Other more clear signs, I think, of dysregulation in children would be like a tantrum, or having a meltdown, or crying, or getting upset, even throwing, hitting, kicking. Those are signs of something's going on deeper than what we can see that might, be making them dysregulated. Some other signs that I think I see a lot in the feeding therapy world are like turning their head away, or arching their back, splaying their fingers out. Even like a change in breathing. So I feel like this one you have to be really down on the child's level and right there with them to see that. But they might have increased breathing, or usually that one, but maybe decreased breathing too, breathing rate. Some kiddos might kind of stare off into space, or freeze, or kind of shut down and become a little bit more withdrawn. So those are kind of, yeah, I guess some of the main signs of dysregulation that I see. And then, yeah.
Well, yeah, I want to, for those who are here live with us, have you think and reflect about the clients you work with. And a lot of you might be in a variety of different settings. For you guys, what are some signs of dysregulation you see in your clients? Overt ones, the ones that anyone might notice. But if you guys can reflect a little bit on those subtle signs of dysregulation, very often you figure those out about each unique kid over time. But put those in the chat. I'd love to see what you notice about dysregulation in your clients. I just came from a client right before we got on here. One of her subtle signs is I'll see her lower lip get tight, and she'll start making a little noise between her teeth. Just this little sign that I know that things are about to ramp up. So yeah, if anyone can think of anything like that, please feel free to share it. Now, tell me about caregiver dysregulation.
That's a big one. So before I talk about that, I want to talk about co-regulation, which I think is super important. And when caregivers are dysregulated, the child is also likely to be dysregulated. So co-regulation is the process of, one person, like the therapist, the parent, the caregiver, helping another person regulate their emotions, their attention, their body through a supportive interaction. And there's a variety of strategies or tools that might help specific kiddos co-regulate, or strategies for a caregiver that they know are going to help them regulate that they need to do with a partner or something like that. So co-regulation is huge. And I think I see a lot of times where it's hard for parents and caregivers to know what's going on with their kid. And I think that's being a therapist, it's really important for us to help parents understand their child's unique sensory preferences and needs so that when they are in that dysregulation or meltdown mode, they have an idea like, okay, maybe it's from this, and here's what we can do to kind of reset and help everybody regroup.
Now, for a caregiver who is dysregulated, I'm thinking about the different levels of awareness that a caregiver might have about their own state. So I'm sure you've worked with a range of different caregivers where some of them come in and they know themselves pretty well. They know what spikes them. They have some good self-care skills in the moment, all the way to people who don't have, not the skills, but I feel like you know what I'm trying to get out, that they don't yet have maybe the vocabulary for what their body's experiencing. For those families who might be brand new to even thinking about regulation in their own bodies, what does education look like for them?
Yeah, so usually I like to ask parents to give me scenarios of a time where they, their child's dysregulated, or if we're not using that language yet, like if your child's struggling or having a hard time, what's going on? What do you notice in your child? And then I like to ask what they feel in those situations. And a lot of times caregivers are like not used to thinking of it like that. And a lot of times they'll kind of pause and I'll give some examples for specifically feeding therapy. I work with a lot of breastfeeding dyads, and if the baby's having trouble latching and the parent or the baby is screaming, crying, popping on and off the breast all the time, and I ask the parent, what do you feel in that situation? I would say the majority of them are like, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I feel like I have to stop right then and there. So just asking questions, and usually once I ask one open-ended question, people start to kind of spill it all out there, and we can get a good idea of like, okay, this might be kind of triggering for them, or different things like that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of staying away from the yes or no questions.
Yeah.
Love an open-ended. I also love like just a declarative, like tell me more about blank.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get people talking, I mean, it's really cool to see what comes out and how they make meaning out of their own experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I love talking about feelings with people. And that's similar to what I do when I'm doing like working on play and working on language and coaching families of how did you feel when you just did that? And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that surprised look of like, why does that matter?
Yeah.
Why would you care about how I feel? But it's so important
Mm-hmm.
because what's happening in that dyad is having a significant impact on the kid.
Definitely.
Or like, what was your experience of that? Like, what was
Mm-hmm.
your experience of that strategy? And again, the first few times, like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
But getting them to look back in on their experience of it, it's going to create there's some metacognition you can build on top of that.
Definitely. And I find that, especially when I'm doing education about those different sensory systems, parents will start to notice their
Yes.
own
Yes.
sensory preferences, like, especially again in the feeding therapy and sensory messy play world. I'm like, how do you feel about mess in your space? Or what if your hands get sticky? What do you feel? And they'll start to say, like, oh my gosh, I really hate getting my hands sticky or messy, or I want to wipe everything off immediately, or when I'm in a busy environment, I kind of shut down. And so really giving them that education, because not everybody knows about these different sensory systems, and giving them that knowledge to be able to kind of, look at themselves and understand their own preferences too can help so much.
I feel like as adults, we get so used to ourselves and our patterns that to have someone help us pause and think about what we do, how we feel is really powerful. It reminds me of, so in a lot of work with Gestalt processors, play can look quite different than parents might anticipate their child will
Mm-hmm.
play. So lining up, creating tableaus to replicate TV shows, ordering play, even like dumping play. So just all the Legos, boom,
Mm-hmm.
form of play. And very early techniques for connecting with a Gestalt processor is mirroring the way that they play, which is I just feel like connects so much to like co-regulation and the cue reading and the signaling, because you have to be with, you have to be
Yep.
so with. And it's so funny what happens is as parents and caregivers in general are coached to mirror and copy that play, some of them will look at me and go, this is really nice. Like,
Yeah.
this feels really good.
Oh.
It's that cool aha moment of they learn about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's less of like an othering from their kid. So they're like, wow, this thing that you do that I used to not understand, now I'm learning how my body feels with it too. And I can be
Mm-hmm.
with there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I love the I, you kind of sharing this experience is making me think about like the DIR floor time approach. Not sure if you utilize that, but I use that kind of approach in my sessions all the time where, if there's exactly like a child lining toys up, I'm going to be right there with them lining my toys up too. And
Mhm.
it's really special what can happen in those sessions from a regulation perspective when, we're doing that play scheme that they prefer and they love where a caregiver might come in and try to show the child how to stack the
Yeah.
cars or something or toys and it's a great opportunity for coaching and teaching
Yeah.
and helping parents understand.
And that's where I tell even teachers too, working with teachers, where I'm like, we can get to stacking later. We can
Mhm.
get to all of those forms of play that you think of first later.
Yeah,
Right now, it's that witness and helping that kid feel really safe. Because I think about for a lot of Gestalt processors, just the act of getting near the toys or getting close to their play feels threatening to their nervous system. What are you going to do? Are you going to take it away? Are you going to interrupt?
yep.
And then all the things we might not think about. Like I remember, speaking of senses, during my first year of being a speech therapist, other than my clinical fellowship year, I went in, I was so excited to work with this kid. And his RBT turned to me. He was so sweet about it. And he was like, hey, can you not wear perfume to work? And I was like, gosh, of course not. Like, I didn't even think of that. But he was like, I know that brand new kid to me is really sensitive to smells. And so even things like that weren't as like, I'm just like all these little parts of the joining in with a kid, even that might feel like a threat to their nervous system too. Uh,
Definitely.
Shiny jewelry, or there's so many things that can contribute to it. We gotta think about what are all those little elements that might feel like a threat, and then we can get to that really like kind of the play that everyone thinks of later.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so we talked about some signs of dysregulation. We talked about educating families about really like some of their own signs and what they can do. How about with therapists themselves? So I want to hear about for maybe for your experience, noticing your own dysregulation when you're working with families and kids, because I know we're not perfect, or we have bodies and brains that come into sessions. How do you take care of yourself when you're in this role?
Yeah, this is a great question. I feel like it's easy to get dysregulated in certain sessions.
Yeah.
I think because I'm an OT and I'm obsessed with sensory processing and have a good understanding of my own sensory stuff. Again, having that knowledge, I think, is power. But for me, I have definitely been in sessions where babies crying, toddler sisters running around the house,
Mhm.
having a full-on meltdown, screaming. The mom is like trying to manage the toddler, but also doesn't want to leave me in the session alone. And so sessions like that, where I definitely am sensitive to auditory input. So when that kind of session is going on, I really have to almost go into like tunnel vision of this is my client that I'm working with. This is what we're working on, the skill we're working on, and that's it. And that helps me. I also do a lot of like deep breathing during my sessions, or just pausing and and you know, knowing that I have to kind of reset myself. That's a big one I do. I also really hate when my hands are messy. And as a feeding therapist, I always have a little wet wipe on my lap under the table, under the high chair, so that if I'm sitting there touching messy things, I can quickly wipe my hands off underneath. Um, that's a big one that I struggle with.
Yeah. Yeah, so knowing yourself, and this is another one where for those of you who are here live, I want you to think about how do you take care of yourself during sessions. Maybe there's someone out there who's never gotten dysregulated during session. I would love to meet them and ask what's up. But how do you take care of yourself in a session where the conditions push the buttons that you have? I don't have the auditory sensitivity myself, but I definitely have, I have a very small cup for visual. So
Okay.
if there's a lot of fast movements, I know I can get pretty nervous, even if intellectually I know exactly what's going on. Like if a kid is moving really fast, especially if there's hitting or kicking, my hands know what to do. You know, I'm really good at the block maneuvers,
Mm-hmm.
but I do get that overwhelm and threat response. So I've had to figure out what can I do to tell my eyes that I'm still safe, and I've
Yeah.
had to do that over time.
Yeah.
Um, the deep breath, using breath is really powerful for us, but it also is just biologically such a good cue for the people who are there in the session with us. Breath is such an amazing auditory signal to others.
Mm-hmm.
If our breathing is fast as therapists, that's going to give that acoustic and visual cue of to the oldest parts of our brain, right? Of like, we're in danger.
Yeah.
But the slowness of the breathing that we can model is going to help. It's going to help so much. And just modeling it without talking about it. I've had non-speaking kids. When I do the psychological side. So the 2 inhales in and 1 out. So
Mm-hmm.
non-speaking kid looked at me and imitated it. It was one of like the clearest things he's ever imitated. I was like, oh, it must have had such an impact on him if he wanted to imitate that.
Yep. That's awesome. That's really neat.
Someone in the chat just said something very interesting. They said that they say out loud the type of dysregulation they're feeling as an example for the client. So almost
Cool.
narrating their own experience of dysregulation.
I love that.
Me too.
That's a really cool idea.
Yeah. Yeah. What is that like? Therapeutic self-disclosure. I think there's like a term.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then someone else just shared, as a twice exceptional person, I also talk to clients about dysregulation too. Yeah. I think that's really powerful for kids who've, with the like communication ability, like the receptive language for that. Someone else, we've got so many things people are putting in. Pause, breathe, narrate what you see, and as they say, name it to tame it.
That's really great. Another really helpful tool for me, especially in those baby and toddler sessions, is like changing my scenery and changing our scenery. So I might pick the baby up, we go walk over to the window, where, we might have been on the floor, on a swing, on a therapy ball, something like that. Like just leave that scenario and go reset somewhere else. Looking out the window is always a really helpful tool for myself, for every kid. And it's just like we don't have to speak, we don't have to do anything. We're just looking out the window. And that is like a really nice reset for everybody in my session. So
You just said something so important: not speaking. There are a lot of people here, and people are going to listen, where the idea of not talking during a session feels antithetical to our job.
Yep.
Tell me about your relationship with using silence.
Silence is one of my favorite therapeutic tools ever. I think it's so powerful, and sometimes it's what everybody needs in the session. And I think in my experience of, co-treating with speech therapy or PT or other therapists in general, I think sometimes if I'm modeling silence, or I, encourage them, like, let's just have, pause for a second and like not speak. It's pretty amazing what can happen in the session. And thinking about this reminds me of, I don't know if you've heard of the like pyramid of learning. I'm trying to think who made that, but I'll look it up sometime. So basically it's a pyramid, and at the base of the pyramid is like all of our sensory systems. So all 8 systems I listed. And then as the pyramid goes up, there's like higher level cognitive skills, behavior, language is at like the tippy top, motor skills, things like that are all above it. So it's a sign of how the foundation at the bottom of that pyramid is our nervous system, our sensory systems, and that has to be functioning, regulated, working efficiently in order for us to have access to those higher level skills. So language being one of them. If we're taking, one type of stimuli out, auditory input, us talking, that's one less thing that a child has to process, right? Especially if they're overwhelmed or dysregulated or something. They've got a lot of other things going on that we can't always see.
Mhm.
So I love silence. I use it all the time. Sometimes I feel like I have sessions where I don't say anything.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's so important.
So I looked it up. I found it.
Okay.
It's from 1991,
Yeah, it's old.
and it's the Pyramid of Learning by Taylor and Trott. So OT Kathleen Taylor and special educator Marion Trott, often referred to as the Taylor-Trott Pyramid of Learning. And yeah, so I'm looking right now, and I did put a link in the chat for anyone who wants to take a look. So down at the bottom, it says central nervous system, and then we've got sensory systems, sensory motor, perceptual motor, and then cognition and intellect up there. And then someone in the chat also said it seems to be like related to or based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah, there's
Definitely.
definitely relationships there. We love triangle shapes in our fields. The EVP triangle, we've got this triangle too, pyramids.
Yeah, and sometimes I think this is such a nice, simple visual that I'll like give this to parents, or I'll pull it up on my computer and show them so they can understand, like if they're frustrated, why isn't my child crawling, or why are we having a hard time with our fine motor skills, or why aren't we speaking yet? I show them that and I'm like, this is where we're at. This is what we have to focus on.
Yeah, like what parts need to be filled in so that we
Yeah.
can get higher up. Definitely. I'm seeing there's one more that I did want to share related to like helping kids make sense or what we can model. I didn't want to leave it behind. They let their clients know that every day is different. Someday we might feel more bothered by something, other days not. Helping them feel safe and secure. They don't have to like always try to be perfect. And so like that our sensory experience changes day to day. And that I know for me, like how full my cups are for all those different sensory system, it shifts not just day to day, but oh my gosh, hour to hour, sometimes minute to minute. You mentioned, so yeah, like taking stimuli away. I like to see, so I had a tough session with a kid earlier today where it was one of those moments when I had to just sit back and be like, I don't know what to do right now, which doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. But I knew that figuring out what to do meant I had to like drop back, reduce stimuli for myself and reduce stimuli for her. And through that use of silence, we could then slowly build back up. It didn't look like a traditional like speech therapy session, but it was kind of like, it felt like kind of like going to look out the window in like a metaphoric sense, where it's like, okay, drop everything away. So then I can make a much better decision about where to go next from a place of like quiet and peace.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like a great example of you using co-regulation and realizing like, okay, I'm the adult here and I'm kind of guiding this, right? So they're looking to you for support. Probably they don't know how to help themselves or regulate. So that's really awesome.
Yeah. And I just ended up putting on like a song that made me feel really happy too. It's a song that I knew she would love. It's a song that made me happy. And so she could sense, because she picks up on, you can't fool this kid. You can't. A song that I was genuinely feeling happy about, so that she could hope maybe then engage in like that affective or emotional entrainment. And then we could get back there together.
Yeah. I think using silence too is one of those things that is hard for caregivers. And I like to try to educate them on that. And I usually go about it by explaining it from the perspective of like, it's just one more thing for them, their little nervous system to have to process. And in sessions, a lot of times, if I have a child who's getting dysregulated, starting to have that meltdown, the caregiver tends to want to fix it. And
Yeah, yeah,
so I give them cues of like, that they might use a lot of language and be talking to them and is something wrong? Do you need this? And that's
yeah.
like so much for them. So I usually just encourage them like, let's just pause and take a quiet break.
Yeah. And what you just said there, both of those, they were questions, and adding on questions
Yeah.
to a dysregulated state, there's a lot of demand there. So we're adding demand, we're adding external demand to internal demand that was based on external. It's adding more and more.
Yeah.
And so shifting to declaratives is a great one, but also just exactly pulling that language away is really helpful. But it's hard when everything in our bodies want to like jump in and help these kids and fix it. And then there's kind of the irony of sometimes the most helpful thing isn't to jump right in and do that.
Definitely. This is a hard strategy, I think, in therapy. When I was a new therapist, this was like one of the hardest things for me was to be quiet. And I think, as I take on students or if I'm ever training a new therapist, it's one of those things you kind of just have to keep reminding them because it is like it's a reaction and it's an instinct of us to talk and fill the space.
Yeah. It also, I think, takes having experience with it being successful.
Absolutely.
The more you experience success with the pullback and the quiet, leading to that richer, more connected result, the more your own brain is going to believe it and your body is going to trust it. So, like, I think when I've had like teachers I've worked with, or even other therapists I've mentored, when a kid is having what seems like the worst day of their life, they're like, how do you stay so calm? Like, how do you just, like, nothing in you shifted? I'm saying, because I've done it so many times and it's worked, and I trust that we're going to get through it. I
Yeah.
trust that we're going to make it through this by pulling back and getting to that co-regulation. We will get to the language, we'll get to the grammar when their body is ready to get back on that staircase to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about co-treats? Tell me about those. How do you work with SLPs?
I love co-treats, and I feel like I have learned so much from the SLPs that I've worked with. Um, I think it it takes like practice, and you almost have to like what's the saying, like something about humble pie. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm like, what is that one? But I
Humble
think
pie.
like being able to take feedback from them
Yeah.
and me give feedback to them, and vice versa. But I think in certain, sessions where I know I'm going to be co-treating with a speech therapist, I will ask from their perspective, like, hey, what can I do to support communication? What have you noticed works well for them? What doesn't? And then I'll give some suggestions of like regulation strategies, or hey, if you notice X, Y, or Z happening, that might be a sign we're getting a little dysregulated. And here's things I know help. And that's why I love speech and OT co-treats though, because we both have our expertise in our niche areas, but when it comes together and there's like the flow between therapist and the kid, and it can be so special. And I feel like those sessions are where the biggest strides are made. I had a session this afternoon where both mom and dad were present. Speech was there, I was there,
Wow.
and this is a little one where it's taken weeks to transition away from the couch, basically, for sessions. Like that's where we were. And so, we finally got off the couch. We're moving around. They have a swing. We're using the swing. And there, any introduction of a novel activity, or, we had an AAC device out today too, and she hasn't been using that lately. She's kind of been on strike with that. So we're just like reintroducing it, and you can see where she's getting frustrated and kind of, she's one where she'll kind of turn inward and shut
Yeah.
down and not engage and just like sit there. And so that's an opportunity where I'm talking to parents, because they are the kind of parents who are like, oh, do this, this, and this. Do you want to watch this? Do you want to hold this?
Yeah.
And letting them know, like, we're just gonna let her sit here right now and pause. And then I'll ask the speech therapist, like, is there something, you know, a script that we've heard her use before that we can do on her device, or they'll just do that because they know.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just was ended up being a really special session where, you know, maybe it didn't happen right away in the first 5 minutes, but by the end of the session, she was super engaged with the communication device. She wasn't necessarily using it, but she
Yeah.
was looking and, um, you know, communicating with us like in her own ways of how she wanted to do more of something, or it was just really, really special. So I think the combo of OT and speech is huge.
I know. I wish we had more opportunities to do that, because I know funding's a big issue.
Yeah.
We're getting that paid for, and just timing, scheduling. Um, you mentioned some of the ways you can pair and like respectfully like provide advice, provide ideas. I think it's a great idea to start with kind of like what you want feedback on.
Mm-hmm.
There was one thing I used in my previous position for other disciplines, because I didn't want to be like the new, my first job. I don't want to be like the new SLP being like, you should do this, you do this. I would say, can you observe me for a couple minutes and tell me what you think I should do differently? Because it immediately puts it onto their expertise,
Mm-hmm.
saying, I'm probably missing something. Can
Yeah.
you help me? And it's very disarming for
Yeah.
people. Ooh, okay, you value, because I do. I genuinely
Yeah.
do want it, but it immediately says, I need you. I value
Mm-hmm.
you. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one. And then sometimes when I've done a co-treat, I'll go in and I'll say, what do you wish you knew about this kid? That's a big open-ended one, because then they
Mm-hmm.
can, oh, what might be missing? Or what do I feel like would make me more confident? So that's another opening. I love a good opening line. So that might be an opening line to use.
Yeah, I love that.
You're making me think about when this session that you had earlier, and I love that you're talking about scripts and AAC. Awesome. Um, I think another benefit of having a co-treat, especially when teachers might be present, but for us, for how we work, for caregivers being present, is that the caregivers then get to watch how we talk to each other and how we think.
Mm-hmm.
We get to externalize the thought process of, how do two therapists think about this kid? And then the parent might start to adopt some of those same ways of reflecting and problem solving. So it's kind of this cool, like, performance of thought process that I think could be really
Mm-hmm.
helpful.
Yeah, that's really neat. It's a nice idea.
Um, one more that so much came to mind when you were talking. That's why I love anecdotes. So much gets sparked. So I have an OT that I share 3 clients with. But we don't, she's also a travel therapist.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to overlap.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've ended up doing in the home, and this could work well in classrooms too, is having a whiteboard. I asked the family, can
Oh.
you put a whiteboard in this kid's room? And on one side, it's going to be my stuff. On one side, it's going to be hers. And that way we can still be in communication, even though we aren't able to do co-treats. So
Yeah,
that would be a tactic too.
I love that. I have a therapist who, again, same kind of situation. We've never been able to actually be together. And it's also hard to set up a phone call and things like that. So we've been kind of updating each other. It's like every 2 weeks where I'll send an email right after my session and I'm like, here's what went well today. We loved this toy, because I think how the schedule works out is I go on Monday, they go on Wednesday. So, you know, I can be like, we loved this light up specific toy or the ball toy or whatever. And then they can have that in their session and they know it's motivating and going to be one that they're going to, you know, get something out of. And then I'll ask questions or they'll share with me about like, oh, we're really focusing on this script today or something. And so then I can utilize that in my sessions too. And I feel like that's been really helpful.
Yeah. that could be powerful. And this requires permission. If it's, if you're working through just with the family, getting their permission written, of course, it could be harder with a school, of course, is sending video clips. So that's been really helpful for me with shared clients for the GLPs I work with, is taking a quick video during the session of what I'm doing. So I'll like prop my phone up and I'll show, so I use singing a lot. I'll show how I'm mirroring them and then layering song on top, maybe how I'm changing out lyrics, show them how I'm doing play techniques, and then just shoot that over real quick to them. So then they actually get to witness what I'm doing and take out what they like. And so the sharing of videos has been really powerful too, if you've got that actual permission structure in the way that you work.
Yep, I've actually done that as well, and it's been really helpful. And then sometimes we have one kiddo in mind who likes to watch the video too, and will be carrying their little device around the house, and here's a video of me talking or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, videos are fun.
I love video modeling for so many reasons, especially if you can build enough safety for the caregiver to get videos of themselves and watch those back. And I can imagine that, I don't know if you use video for for the caregivers you work with, but that could also be a way for people to see their own posture, their body tension. I hadn't thought about that as being a place for them to notice how their bodies are.
Yep, I do that a lot, especially with nursing and positioning for that. A lot of moms have their shoulders up to their ears. So I'll say like, hey, can I take a picture of your position right now? And then we look at it together. And, it's not that I'm attacking or coming off like, look at your posture's so bad, but I think it's helpful for them to see. And then in real time, we can practice like, okay, let's relax our shoulders or something like that. Yeah, I think I do that with a lot of families, with especially when I'm working on motor skills, and it might be a stretch or exercise or something that they're supporting their child with. I'll take a video of them doing it, and then we can watch it back and kind of talk about what we see.
Cool. And think about mirrors being powerful for that too.
Yep, I use a lot of mirrors in therapy as well.
Yeah. And I find that mirrors can be such a powerful place for a kid too, to witness themselves, I see them kind of practicing movements in the mirror too. So that's a big one that I've been pushing more, is like, if I'm working with you, is there a mirror in your kid's room, a full length one where they can see their whole body in motion? Because it's giving them that live biofeedback, which is really, really powerful. It reminded me of something I've done with helping caregivers and teachers notice their own patterns and kind of their own like automatic states, or baseline. I think baseline is a fair word for it, for that questioning, kind of the anxious questioning. And I'm not saying as in like anxiety, that's definitely out of my scope, but more of like the anxious style of questioning. I'll ask them, of course, I'm always going to ask permission, because you don't want it to be in like a judgmental way of like, oh, your shoulders are up. But I'll ask them, okay, for 5 minutes, do I have your permission to keep track of how many questions you ask versus how many comments you make? And they're always like, yeah, of course. And then I prime and I say, what do you think the ratio might be? Or what do you think the balance might be? And immediately, most people sit back and be like, I probably asked a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So then they start to think about it. So they're predicting, I don't know, you just see them become almost like more embodied in that moment. And then as I'm doing that 5 minutes, and 5 minutes is a long time for this. So then you see I didn't even have to say, don't ask so many questions, because that's a harsh thing to hear. I just had to kind of like set the table, and I watch them as they're doing it. They start to look at me after they ask a question. So that's an exercise too of building that awareness, without just being like, change this, do this, because that doesn't feel good.
I love that.
And then at the end, I'll like show them the numbers, and people, they truly can't believe how like the amount of questions to the amount of comments. And I'll keep asking and prompting and say, well, what do you think? Why do you think that? Why do you think that that's your ratio? And a lot of people will immediately be able to say, like, because I didn't know what to say to my kid.
Yeah.
Oh, or that's what I thought you did. You ask your kids what color everything is.
Yep.
That's a really cool exercise for people to start to build that awareness. It also gives you, as a therapist, 5 very rich minutes of observation
Yeah.
to see how people interact with their kids.
That's really neat. I love that idea.
Tell me more about, I don't know, I learn really well through anecdotes. And so do any families come to mind where you just felt like you had a really successful experience building their capacity for co-regulation?
Hmm. Let me think. Definitely. I'm trying to think
Yeah.
of who would be a good one to share.
While
Um,
you're thinking about that, I want to open up to, to those
yeah.
of you who are here live. If you guys can think of any teachers you work with or parents or kids you've worked with where you feel like you help them a lot with co-regulation. So I'll toss that out to the chat. Well, if you want to think about any
Yeah.
families for
Yeah.
you.
No, I have an idea, a couple ideas, but for a little one who I was working on some motor skills with for crawling and things like that, they anytime they needed like hands-on support from,
Yeah.
parent, me, whatever, um, anytime they had that like tactile input, it was like they'd arch their back, they'd freak out. It was like clearly they were not into that. And I found that the mom, whenever she was trying one of the positions that I'm educating her, modeling it, and I'm like, hey, why don't you give it a try and see if it feels comfortable? She was so uncomfortable. She had a hard time with like her lefts versus rights, and she was really stuck on that. So if I'm like, oh, we're gonna bring our right foot, our right knee up or something, she's like really thinking, and she's like, okay, right, no, like you could tell she was like overwhelmed. And I swear that our kids can feel when our heart rate is elevated, when we are tense, like they can feel it. And I think I would go and do the position. Baby would be fine. They could hold it for a little. It was great. Mom would do it. And then she's feeling bad, right? She would feel upset that what am I doing wrong? Or what is it? Is it my connection with my kid, which that's a whole other thing. And so by pausing and asking her questions about how are you feeling right now? Like, is this feeling stressful for you or anything? And she said, yes, this is like so hard. I feel like she shared that she feels awkward in her own body and motor planning for herself is really hard. And so we ended up doing where I was like, I would put my hands on and she would put her hands on top of mine. And that was really helpful for her. And I, just encouraged her when you're feeling that overwhelm or like something isn't going right, just pause and take a break. We don't have to push through, positioning strategies or things like that. We can absolutely take a break, try again later. And that was really helpful for her.
I like that of kind of like the layering together, because that's really good motor and tactile feedback.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Something I think giving a lot of options
Mm-hmm.
to the people we're coaching so they feel like they have more agency and more choice. Something I've started playing around with these past few months going into sessions, because coaching can take so many forms, and it's like you often don't know where the session's going to go until
Mm-hmm.
you're in it. And I think with GLPs in general, it's like you can have the best plan in the world. And like I joke all the time on the podcast, I'm like, that special interest that you studied up on, they don't care about that anymore.
Oh yeah.
But giving the caregivers you're working with options for how they want to participate too. So we're seeing less of that freeze response. I have one mom I work with where I am still working very hard. She goes into a freeze a couple times a session because
Mm-hmm.
I really need to figure out how to do more shifts to not put her there.
Yeah.
Um, but I've started giving people more options of what would be most helpful right now. Would it be to watch me again?
Mm-hmm.
Would it be, do you want to dive right in and try it? Do you want to dive right in and try it? And I go step out of the room for a second so you can
Ooh,
do
yeah.
it. That one is, that's opened things up for a couple people. And it's again, it's that look on their face. We're like, that's allowed.
Yeah.
And then another one is, do you want to do this together? Like, let's get down and do it on the floor. So you're giving them options for how they want to try it out.
Yeah.
And then they get to figure out what feels safest.
I love that. I love that you said the stepping out of the room. I do that sometimes too.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like if people are watching me doing something and it's new for me, it's
Yeah.
stressful. So I think that's a really helpful way to, we're thinking about obviously the child and their needs and regulation, but also the parent and how they learn best, because ultimately we see the child maybe 1, 2 times a week, or maybe more than that, depending on your setting. But they're there with them all day, every day. And so we want them to be able to carry these things over at home. So that's a really great idea to give them those different options.
And also use it. I think I talk about videos so much, but that could also put kind of a degree of separation. I'm thinking about how can we help people get some, not distance from like the fear and anxiety, but putting some more safety around that, some more cushioning. It could also be, do you want me to step out of the room and you take a video of yourself do it? And then we can watch it together. That adds another layer of buffer there of, I don't come back and watch you do it live because that might be escalated. I come back and we look at this. I call it the third thing. It's that third thing. Now we have a triangle and we can look at this together with a little bit of distance. So that's another one.
Love that.
This is a moment now for those of you who are here live, where if you have any questions for Erin, this is a good time to put them in the chat so that we can make sure we have enough time to ask them. Erin, I'm wondering from you, when it comes to language and language modeling, what are some of the things that you wish OTs knew more about or you knew more about with language?
I think that obviously each kid is so unique and their needs and preferences and stuff is going to totally differ per kid. But I think I would like to know if there's certain approaches, or I think I struggle with when I am using language and I'm not using my silence.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to say, or how am I supposed to say it, right? So if a kid is maybe scripting on something, or if they are, I actually don't know the correct speech therapy term for this, but
Yeah.
if they are saying a word and maybe it's hard for me to understand, but I want to maybe repeat it back to them, like,
Yeah.
what should I do?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you don't understand it.
Mhm.
Okay. Are we talking about like an autistic kid,
Yeah.
GLP, or like late talker? What do you think?
Let's say autistic GLP.
Okay. So in that case, and I'd love to hear what everybody else does too, I'm often going to echo it right back.
Okay.
So what they produce, if it might be, if it's a gestalt, if it's a script, even if it's just, we call like the intonational contour, like,
That's the word I'm looking
yeah,
for.
like the contour of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to imitate it right back. And I'm going to try and replicate the pitch, the rhythm. So I think about like an intonational contour, you kind of want to imagine like they're painting time with sounds. So imagine it like, okay, if their voice created a painting, how can I paint that same thing? So I try to imagine what it would look like, because there's no words to anchor us.
Mm-hmm.
That sound painting, how can I then like paint it again with my voice? Because I think for some people, they're like, oh, I don't know what words to say. Okay, don't imagine it as words. Imagine it as this shape you can then replicate. So I'll do it right back. And then sometimes what really helps is when you say it out loud back to them, sometimes then it clicks in what they might be trying to say. Now, Alan in the chat said, imitate it right back and add a little bit more to it. That can be great too. I like that, a little bit more emphasis, because then you're kind of jazzing it up a little bit. You're also making your signal, I call it, more salient. So if they do like, ah, you could go, ah, da. You can a little bit of oomph,
Mm-hmm.
elongation, because you're adding maybe a little bit more reward value to what you're doing too.
Yeah,
And that higher reward value, then you're more rewarding. And then you might get
definitely.
for it.
Yeah.
SC in the chat just said, after oh my gosh, echoing the intonational contour, they often say, I heard that. I do that too. I go, I hear you.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Okay, I
hear
like
you.
that.
Um, because you're just kind of, I think about like a ping pong, it's like
Mm-hmm.
they served it to you. And even
Mm-hmm.
if you don't know what they're saying, serve something back.
Yeah.
You're not going to like catch the ping pong ball and be like, what?
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't understand you.
Right.
Send it right back with that affirmation, that excitement, that whatever signal they sent, whatever communication was sent your way, it was important to you, even if you
Mm-hmm.
have no idea what it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. That's helpful. I love
Um,
that.
it also, I think, can be valuable because you're telling that kid what you heard. If that's a child who has, auditory processing differences, motor output differences, they might think they were crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
But when you mirror it back to them, when you echo it back, now you're showing them what you heard and that it maybe didn't match up to the plan that they had for their communication.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge.
Okay, so as we're coming to close, I'd love to hear if there was a basic core message from an occupational therapist who is all about regulation and connection for the SLPs out there, what would it be? What do you really want them to know?
I'm glad you asked this because I was just thinking, oh, I hope I have time to say this.
Do it.
I would say regulation before expectation. Everyone should have that imprinted in their brain.
Yeah.
So before we can expect our kids to, you know, try something new, learn something new, work on those higher level skills, we first have to be regulated. So if, you've been working on something for a while and the session's not going well, maybe take a step back and see, are we regulated? Same thing goes for caregivers too, when you're working with them and coaching and educating. So that's my statement.
I love that. Regulation for expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. That's a perfect place to end. Erin, thank you so much for joining. For those of you who are here participating, we had a very active chat tonight. I loved it. If you are here live, you better get credit for attending. You're going to go back to Speech Therapy PD. You're going to take the quiz, fill out the feedback form, and make sure that you get your hour. For those of you who are listening later on, once again, if you want to get credit for this episode for free, you can use my code Gestalt33 so you can have enough hours before the end of the year. I'll be back here again in 2 weeks. I'm here recording live every 2 weeks for the Gestalt Get-Together. And let's give a big thank you. We already have a lot. Oh, there's a lot of thank yous in the chat. Erin, I think people might have gotten a lot out of this. So thank you so
Good,
much.
I'm glad.
Oh, and where can people connect with you and find you?
I'll type it here in the chat. I am open to email. You can check out my website, my Instagram, all the things. I'll give you guys everything you need.
Great. And it's Tiny Tides
Yes.
Therapy?
Yep.
Great. All right, fantastic. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a great evening and we'll see you again very, very soon. Good night,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Good night.